Okay, thank you everyone for putting time today. I'm Jim Binias, CEO of ResilientX Security. Happy to be here. And special thanks to our partners, Logon, which has organized this webinar for us to be able to present our solution to our esteemed customers and partners in Asia region. So in this webinar, we are going to discuss about attack surface and what is extended attack surface and how ResilientX can help mitigate risks and mitigate problems regarding the attack surface of the organizations. But before starting, I want to do a very brief overview about ResilientX and a brief history of why we have created ResilientX. So nowadays, there are a lot of companies that focus on the after attack. So there are a lot of companies who work on XDRs, EDRs, SIEMs, and different solutions. But there is a shift from threat to risk. So we need to understand how we can prevent those attack scenarios. So from the moment that the attacker gain access to any kind of server or any kind of client in any kind of organization, how we can shift that. So one of the best approaches is proactive security. And that's why we have created ResilientX. So ResilientX is an holistic approach. We are creating a holistic approach to proactive security. And with our solution, unified exposure management and third-party risk management, we try to achieve that results. I've been working in cybersecurity industry for over 15 years. This is actually ResilientX is my second company. I did another company in past, which I've exited and worked in multiple international companies and international organizations for securing their infrastructure in terms of network, in terms of web applications, and also a lot in terms of the attack surface. But let's dive into attack surface management and why we are here. So there are two questions that it's really important, and I think anybody in any organization, they should ask themselves. So first of all, how we can protect what we can see, because this is a very interesting question. At the end, even in philosophical discussions, you cannot understand and you cannot measure the risk to an unknown. Therefore, it's a very important question that every cybersecurity analyst, every CISO, every CIO, or even in a small organization, even the CTOs, they should ask themselves. How can we understand and how can we find the unknowns? Of course, in this case, what we are talking about the digital infrastructure. We're talking about digital assets. Of course, these assets, what we are talking about, might be unknown to us, but they're not unknown to some attackers, because in many scenarios, these assets, this digital infrastructure is exposed to the internet. So the second question is, what is the hacker point of view? The hacker point of view and the hacker point of view to our company, to our organization, is the most important part, and it's the first line of the defense. So I try to give a very short answer. And how can we protect what we can see, and how can we know the attacker point of view is essentially knowing what we own. Knowing what we own, of course, in cybersecurity would be categorized as asset inventory. And understanding of what an attacker can understand about our organization is essentially what we have exposed of that digital assets on the internet or any kind of digital network or digitalized service. So let's deep dive more on what is attack surface and what is extended attack surface. So when we are talking about exposed asset inventory, so exposed asset inventory, there can be we have many types of assets, but the three most important type of assets that we have our application assets, network assets, and what we call it our credential assets, because these three types of assets are the most, you can say, the most vulnerable or potentially vulnerable assets that we always have exposed on the internet. So with the applications, what I mean are, it can be our traditional web applications, it can be our SaaS, it can be our any kind of microservices that we have exposed on the internet, any kind of anything related to a working application on the internet, or even in our internal infrastructure that might eventually get exposed. And in terms of network services, if you think of cloud is essentially a network service. So cloud services, any kind of servers, DMZs, so any kind of server or client that gets exposed to the internet would be categorized here as network services. On the other hand, access to any kind of service, so access to any kind of application or access to any kind of network, require credentials. So these credentials are very important to monitor, very important also to protect. So there are a lot of tools regarding each one of these parts. A lot of tools regarding applications, a lot of tools regarding network, and a lot of tools regarding credentials. But what we are talking about here are essentially anything that we have exposed on the internet that can have an impact on our company. So there is a very big process and there is a very big understanding of the scope of the attack surface and what do we mean about the attack surface. So as you see here, we have mentioned that applications such as traditional websites, such as the WordPress websites, starting from WordPress websites and coming to the API, so we're getting more professional on the application side. So there is a scope and there is a risk. So what is the scope here? Here the scope can be any type of application that a company owns or operate on or rely on. So it would not be only the applications that is owned by our company, but it can be also the applications that we rely on. Of course, the attack surface risk can be, for example, the first question that we mentioned, of course, not knowing comprehensively what we own. So this can be the first problem regarding the attack surface of the traditional or even new applications. We have always technological risk. There is a multi-billion-dollar industry based on technological risk because every day, as you know, there are updates on different applications, on different services, on different software, on different packages of and components of these softwares. Therefore, there would be new vulnerabilities, new problem, new security flaws related to each of those components and related to all those packages in those softwares that are being used. So all technology and technological risk is a very big and very deep discussion that companies should have with themselves. Of course, there are mistakes. Human error has always carried on 30-40% of the problems in this case. Of course, application security, if it's not being tested very well, it can be very problematic in terms of, as you might know, many types of attacks, such as skull injection, such as cross-site request forgery. So it can create actually very problematic security flaws for companies and end up with problems such as data breach, such as access to the unauthorized access to the databases, and many other problems. On the other hand, we have network services. So we mentioned that, for example, for network services, also we are talking about cloud services, servers on-premise services that we have in our house, and it's exposed in the internet. And of course, there are always risks associated with these network services, such as technological risk, which services are not patched, are not well configured, and we haven't put the right configuration. So we have mentioned here the bad practice configuration and misconfiguration. So there are two types of categories as bad configuring, uh, putting a bad practice configuration or misconfiguration. So bad practice configuration here would mean that we intentionally, for a business reason, configure our application to work, but not to be fully secured. So it's not an error, but of course it's an intentional configuration on our side. But on the other hand, it's done because the business needs that. Of course, cybersecurity is always here to help the business side, but of course, making the short uh, the short roads to achieve the goal always might be a problem for business as well. Also in the cybersecurity, creating configurations which might temporarily serve our need would be a very bad practice. On the other hand, misconfiguration are coming from not knowing how, for example, to configure a new, let's say, a new instance on AWS or a new virtual machine on Azure. So essentially, leaving, for example, database ports on openly wide on the internet, of course, is a bad practice. No, sorry, it's a misconfiguration. So it's essentially we want to monitor that. We want to understand what are these problems. And on the other hand, we have the credential side. So credentials, of course, there are problems similar to network services related. But what we are talking about credentials here are not only, let's say, our email addresses, but also the credentials related to our services. For example, if we have a VPN service, so we have a firewall, which we have configured a VPN. So right now I'm talking about the second part on the credentials. So essentially, this VPN service on firewalls would have some credentials. Let's say something like admin and your own your secure password. Of course, these login credentials might not even be related to your company. So it might not have something like @mycompany.com. Of course, those login credentials are also doing part of your extended attack surface. So the attack surface risk, so the credential risk, and talking about the attack surface risk, so all those old risks, plus many other risks such as phishing, such as smishing, the different types of risk can actually have an impact on your credentials. So in case that, for example, you have an unpatched service on your network service or on your web applications, it can actually result to a credential leak. So just to make you an example, if we have a website which is vulnerable to an SQL injection, an attacker can gain access to the database, essentially what we call have an unauthorized access to the database. They can query the database and get the credentials from that database and that web application. So what we are talking here is essentially what is the scope, what are our own assets, and what are the risks. So in this case, what we always say in terms of attack surface management should be done in 4 steps. And the 4 steps are discovery, testing, intelligence, and prioritization. So let me go through these steps very briefly. The discovery part is essentially the first question that we ask ourselves. So we need to understand what we own, what is ours, and what is the level of exposure of that unknown, of that asset, of that digital entity. Then we need to test the asset that we have, because of course, without performing any kind of regular test, without performing any kind of structured test on those assets that we have discovered, we don't know the level of the risk. We cannot measure the exposure. We cannot measure the security flaws that we have found. And of course, right now we are in the era of the AI and the era of the threat intelligence, which we get mixed a lot with different type of data that we have. Beforehand, of course, the process would have been much more simpler. So the process was, I know my list of the assets, my list of IP addresses, I put them on my network security testing tools, which I don't want to name here, but I do the scan, I get the results, and that's it. But right now, of course, for modern organizations, we need to mix that also with intelligence, because we need to understand, let's say we have thousands vulnerabilities, we have 100 vulnerabilities. Which of these vulnerabilities are the most critical one? Which of these vulnerabilities are being exploited in the wild? So what, for example, if I have identified one specific vulnerability, such as, I don't know, CVE 2024 something, how much is the reputation of this vulnerability in hacking forums, on Telegram groups related to attackers? So is this vulnerability being exploited in the wild, or isn't it very impactful on my organization? And then, of course, having all this information, we need to prioritize, because it's very impossible. I talked recently with one of the biggest aerospace companies, and there were three units of 12 people responsible for vulnerability management. And one of the biggest problems that they had was in the phase 3 and phase 4, because of course you can understand that their infrastructure has over 700,000 assets. So 700,000 internal IPs plus external IPs plus applications. And the number of the vulnerabilities that I've identified was very high, and they performed this assessment once. They tried to perform it once a month, but the problem was they couldn't prioritize how they want to resolve which security flaw they need to resolve first, which security flaws they need to prioritize in terms of the intelligence that they had, in terms of the risk, and in terms of the impact. So this is a very important part of the attack surface management and the process. So what we propose in ResilientX is essentially, before ResilientX, what we have thought was possible is most of our fellow vendors are focused on very large enterprises. So therefore, there are many tools related to doing one specific thing without having a holistic and without having a comprehensive approach. So there are very verticalized solutions to test, for example, for web applications, to test, for example, for network security, help you identify your assets, or provide to you some intelligence. So these tools were very verticalized. Unfortunately, they're not connected together. They don't work and they don't integrate together seamlessly. And of course, it would create a very bad operational practice for companies. So we have created ResilientX with a scope of unifying and getting a holistic approach to proactive security. So essentially, you can think of ResilientX Unified Exposure Management as a kind of modular platform, but in a sense that these modules work together perfectly. So just to give you the idea, and going to the previous slide, all this phase is being done directly in ResilientX without any kind of gap. Because this is very important, to be done fast and to be done instantly without having any kind of gap and time for the attackers or for the unknown to attack our servers, to attack our organization. And essentially here in ResilientX, we try to reduce that time, which is something like months of activity, to minutes or hours or maximum days. So what we essentially try to do is reduce the gap from the time that the asset is being identified from the attack surface or from internal assets, and we perform directly the test that is being done, is needed to do on that specific asset. So let's say that we have identified a specific web application security, web application. We perform web application security test directly, and then we go and search for the APIs. Then we perform tests on the APIs, and then we conduct an intelligence scan on web and try to give you the as most as intelligence that we can provide to you, and then give you a prioritized action plan. So this is the benefit that ResilientX Unified Exposure Management gives it to its customer. So essentially, mm, all those tools, I'm not against them. It's very useful if your company is doing only one thing. For example, if you're a software development company and your team needs only to test your web application, maybe you need one specific tool, but it cannot give you the holistic approach to understanding the risk to your infrastructure and to your organization. In this case, ResilientX, you can think of it as a tool which can unify all those views together, and essentially it's an organization slash business helping tool. It can help you to give a visibility on your current state, but of course, it can as well perform specific activities and duties performed by all those tools mentioned here, or many other tools as well. What we have talked until here is essentially what we call it extended attack surface. So extended attack surface would be has different parts and have different entities, starting from the attack surface, which combines web applications, public cloud, external network, OSINT, credentials, and very soon we are going to also cover the software supply chain and the third-party vendors. So we have mentioned two new entities here, and which are third-party vendors and software supply chain, which essentially put aside of any kind of specific digital assets. Your business also rely on software components, and your business also rely on the third party. So essentially, the extended attack surface that we are talking about is these points that I've mentioned in this slide. And what we do essentially in ResilientX, we provide two solutions. So the first solution that we provide is called Unified Exposure Management. As I mentioned before, is a tool, what we call it as an all-in-one tool to perform all those steps from discovery, testing, intelligence, and prioritization in one flow. So this is when you can actually use this tool to specifically identify all of your digital assets, perform different type of security testing, such as DAST, such as network, cloud security posture assessments, and also scan for any kind of intelligence related to your company. On the other hand, the third-party risk management help companies to understand the risk associated to their third-party companies. So let's say that I have 200, 300 different suppliers or different vendors. How can I understand if there is any kind of risk associated to my vendors and help them to improve and help them to mitigate? Of course, with third-party risk management. Third-party risk management can be also a topic for another discussion. So I didn't want to enter into third-party risk management right now, but it's very good to have a brief understanding that our organization relies on other organizations for doing business every day. So in case that, for example, let's say a financial institution that we rely on get a cyber attack, of course, it has an impact also on my organization. So essentially, coming back to unified exposure management, it's a modular platform. As you can see, it has different set of functionalities. There will be also two new functionalities released next month, which relates to the software components and the management of the OSINT data that we find on the web, which we will do the announcement. But right now, our users and our customers are using this platform, Unified Exposure Management, to help them to understand what's there, test it, what is the risk of those assets, and of course, prioritize the remediation efforts. So attack surface management until cloud security posture management is what being done directly on the platform without any kind of effort. And talking about different sides of platform, essentially, I'm going to show you very quickly the platform, what it provides, what it does, how it's structured. But the structure is simple. So there are different modules available, and organization can also get these modules based on their needs. So they don't need to get the full platform, but they can also get the components that they essentially need for their business. So I want to also discuss a couple of case studies. So in this slide, I guess we have mentioned a couple of case studies. So for example, here is our partner, which is a managed service provider, is using our solution to provide to their customers services such as attack surface management or managing the external risk of the customer, and also integrate it into their security operations center. There are many other MSP and MSSPs which we work with daily, because our tool is not only good for the end users or end customers, but also being used directly with from who that provide a service to the end customer. Because this is because the platform also is built on multi-tenant, multi-user platform. It gives you many functionalities in terms of it's a very agile in terms of the usage, and it's a very user friendly. So you can actually integrate it with a different set of tools as well. And I want to also, I think here we are mentioning just mention two customers. So these are one US and one Italian customer. Which one is in manufacturing. So the customer, just to discuss with you guys, is a manufacturing company, the one in Italy, and their problem was the unmanaged and shadow IT that they had exposed on the internet. So what we helped the company is implementation of the attack surface management, connecting the attack surface manager or unified exposure management to their infrastructure, updating and testing their cloud infrastructure, testing their web applications, and moreover installing the internal security testings as well to understand what are the risks and what are the shadow IT that they have exposed on the internet. On the other hand, we have a very large customer is in automotive industry, which they had a problem related to their cloud posture. And essentially our tool helped them because they needed to migrate very fast from on-premise services to cloud services. And essentially going very fast to cloud can also be problematic. So they chose ResilientX as their partner to understand what is the risk associated to their company and how can they mitigate risks related to their attack surface of the cloud part. So I want to do a very brief demo. So something like a 5-minute demo just to show you the platform. But essentially, I would prefer to do one-to-one demo in case anybody interested afterwards. So I want to show you briefly our platform. This is how it's structured. And as I mentioned, the platform works on different on those 4 bases. So we have part that is called assets, and essentially assets can be domains, subdomains, IP addresses, and different type of digital assets that we have, such as certificates, technologies, different AWS accounts, or different set of entities that we can define. On the other hand, we have CVEs, which are the vulnerabilities that we identify, and we have issues. So issues, you can think of issues as tickets, which are which unify and regroup different set of security flaws into one ticket. So essentially here, 25,000 CVEs that we have found on external infrastructure are being regrouped in 1,000, in less than 1,900 issues, or 1,900 tickets. And why we do that? Just to show you how we do it and why we do it. And so essentially, if we come on our asset section, you can see that we can add different set of assets, such as IP addresses, domains, subdomains. The platform automatically, of course, detects any kind of any kind of asset related to your company. So you can also define URLs, IP version 4, IP ranges, so different set of assets. Of course, you can also define the business impact. It can help you to perform custom risk rating on each of your assets. And on the other hand, the platform shows you the issues that we have found on your infrastructure. So these issues can be categorized, and just to give you an idea, these issues can be in application security issues, technology issues, network security issues, credential leaks, and also cloud security issues, phishing risk, and also spam issues. So essentially, we cover a holistic approach to the issues and the problems and the security flaws that exist on your infrastructure. And just to give you an idea, it's super simple to create a new project or starting to use our platform. So let's say I want to use our platform as ResilientX customer. This would be the first phase that a customer or a user would see. And essentially, you can put a name for the project. As I mentioned, there are different set of modules available on the platform based on your license. We have also 3 other modules here. You can choose the frequency that you want to scan. And just to give you an idea on the modules available here, so we have an asset discovery module. We have a technology scan module, which is a non-impactful scanning on your external infrastructure. Then we have what we call it the DAST scan, so application security testing, and also internal, external network security testing, and also cloud integration, which provides you an understanding on your cloud posture. We do have also credential, intelligence, and OSINT, and software, which is coming soon. And you can also choose the frequency. So let's say I'm going to leave it as monthly, and I'm going to insert one domain. So it would ask me one domain to start, but of course, in future, I can insert as how many domains or assets I want in future. So essentially how it works is after 5 to 10 seconds, it will create a dedicated tenant for me. And as you see, there are 3 scans that has been started while I created this project. I can go on my asset section and I can add any type of assets that I want. So I can add the different type of assets such as domains, subdomains, URLs, IP addresses. I can also mention the business impact. I can also give them name or tags to clean everything. And on the other side, the platform will start to work. In less than 1 hour, the platform will get ready, and essentially it has identified all of subdomains, IP addresses, anything related to resilientx.com, and you can see it directly on the platform. Of course, the platform provides much more broader information in case you want to do the integrations or you want to do, for example, the DAST scanning. So essentially, for example, you can perform application security scanning even in authenticated mode. So you can add authentication, you can add different set of URLs or APIs in this case, in terms of Open API, Swagger, Postman, and also test your web application against these URLs if we don't identify those. And you can also add different set of authentications for web applications such as headers, such as cookie, form, HTTP, .hr, or recorded. And the platform provides many different functionalities, which I don't think we would have enough time for doing a full demo here, but I would we will be available with our partner Logon to do even to do one-to-one demos and one-to-one discussions about how UEM can help you and how it can provide you operational resilience. So we're almost at the end of our discussion. I completed. I went 6 minutes over my time, and essentially we are on. If anybody has any kind of question, I would be available to answer for a couple of minutes. If see. So if anybody has any questions, you can send directly into Q&A. This is the first time I'm using Zoho, so I'm not super expert, but I guess see. Okay. The first question, does this tool take care of patching also? The tool does not do the patching side because automated patching is a very dangerous activity. What we can provide is what we call it custom integrations. And custom integrations, we can essentially help you to integrate any kind of patching tool that you have, any kind of existing patching tool that you have with ResilientX platform. I personally, working more than 15 years in this industry, never suggest to do automated patchings. I don't know if you've heard about, of course, you've heard about the CrowdStrike, for example, outrage. It's, of course, it has a lot of question marks, but automated patching is also what I call it a non-optimal practice, because automated patching brings you the understanding of it does not give you the understanding of what are the services, and you just want to go and update and patch everything that is needed. Okay, I hope I answered the question, but regarding the patching, there are different customers that have integrated our tool with their existing patch management tools. So we can also discuss that. There are also MSSPs that are using that. So we can discuss if you want to also do that. You would be able. Web application testing on OWASP top 10. Yes, we perform it based on OWASP top 10, and it's based on two methodologies. So OWASP top 10 for web applications and OWASP top 10 2023 for APIs. So it's essentially we have one specific module for web applications, which is based on OWASP top 10, and one specific module for APIs, which is still based on OWASP top 10. So that's correct. We work based on OWASP. So any other questions? I would give something like around 2 minutes if anybody has any kind of questions, and then if not, you can of course always reach out to our partner or reach out directly to us to connect with. We can have a call with our partner Logon and discuss how ResilientX Unified Exposure Management can help you. Okay, then. Okay, so the last question came through. Okay, any possibilities for a POC? Yes, absolutely. We usually perform a first introduction call to understand the use case that you have. So if you want to use it as an internal tool, or to use it as a tool for your MSP or MSSP, then we provide also a dedicated trial or POC with our partner. Absolutely, we can provide it for attack surface management part, web application part, cloud, and every part related to that. The only part that we don't provide POC is the internal security, internal network security testing. But we can discuss that in the call and understand your specific needs. Thank you again for participating to this webinar, and I'm super glad that we did our first webinar with our partner Logon, and looking forward to have a chat with you directly. Have a great day, and thank you.